And so now, James Ashworth, you can step up to the plate, unmute yourself, and we'll learn a bit about AWS.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Let me just... Sorry, but I've had to put in a proper presentation with our logo and everything. I'm just going to go over AWS very briefly at a high level. Different ways you can use it for hosting and how to kind of estimate what that cost is going to look like on a monthly basis. It is very high level, and I'm not going to go too far into depth with things, but we've got a Q&A section afterwards and ask questions then. So I work for Butterfly. We're a Melbourne-based tech development agency. Essentially, we build custom complex cloud solutions. We build solutions using a variety of different tools and languages. Joomla, WordPress, Wagtail, which is a Django-based CMS. Obviously, from that, we work with PHP, MySQL. We also do Python work and all that stuff. My role is I'm the service desk team lead at Butterfly. My team looks after not only the post-deployment support for our clients, but we also look after all the infrastructure that their applications and websites get put onto. We help with the architecture of the infrastructure and everything that goes into it. So yeah, that's a bit about us there. The first thing I'm going to talk about is these terms, vertical and horizontal hosting. Now with cloud coming into it, there is a big difference between the two. When I look at vertical hosting, it's your classic style of hosting. So say you get a hosting plan through Crazy Domains. That's, you've rented a space of a physical server with a pool of resources. You'll always have those pool of resources that are going to change automatically. Yeah, and then you have one whole server that might have many clients and whatnot. You can generally make the server bigger by putting in more RAM and swapping out hard drives and stuff, but this can result in things like downtime, reboots and whatnot, depending on what you need to do. So, there's a bit of a risk there. And you almost need to have a mindset of slightly over-provisioning and starting larger than what you think, because, you don't want to be rebooting and shutting down. Horizontal hosting, on the other hand, is the opposite. You want to think small. So what's the smallest resource I can provision my website on? And then what will happen is using things like load balancers and auto scaling groups. When there's times of high load, we're going to start up extra servers as we need them, and then shut them down when we don't. So, and you're paying essentially per minute, per hour for those resources that come up and down. So, yeah. One of the caveats is, though, you need to have a mindset with your application that it needs to be stateless, because what will happen is, a server needs to be deleted and recreated, which can be a bit tricky, especially with sites like, Joomla-based sites and WordPress. There's ways around it, like using an EFS, like a electronic file store that you can mount into your servers and store images and PDFs and that kind of user-generated content. these kind of horizontal hosting environments are probably more suited for your clients that will have a dedicated server opposed to being on a shared server, simply because their setup is very unique to them rather than how you set something up for shared hosting. So if you think of it in like land of computers, your vertical scaling is you have a computer and you need more RAM in it, or you need hard drive, you've got to turn it off. You're going to make that computer bigger. Whereas with horizontal scaling, you have your computer, you need more resources, and then you create another computer the same size, and they just horizontally scale as you need the resources, and then will descale when they don't need them anymore. Let me just. When we're talking about costing on AWS, there is a bit of misconception around it, how pricey it can be. The thing you need to remember is just knowing what your requirements are from the start. Do you need a dedicated service? Are you using it for shared hosting? How much RAM and CPU you need? Would the site application benefit from load balancing? The storage you need? Are you going to manage it with a WHM cPanel-like interface? Then you want to use all that information to decide on what instance size you're going to have and all that stuff. Generally speaking, you probably, for a shared hosting environment, you'll be looking at an EC2 and then using the C5 family. They're a bit more geared towards computing and really handle the shared environment pretty well, where you've got multiple Joomla sites on the server. There are tools such as the calculator that can help you gather your costing. So if I go through to create an estimate, EC2 is what you're going to be using mostly. So you can configure it. Set your region to Sydney. So we can come through, we can, say we're using a Linux-based server. We know how many CPUs you want. We probably want, say, 2 and 4, for example. And then it'll give us a recommendation. We can also search if we know the instance, what they're called. We can search for them. I can set how many that I'm after. So if I might be building a fleet of 20 of these servers. I'm putting 20. Now I'm just putting 1. You have different pricing models as well. So on your on-demand instances, you're going to get charged for your usage every month. It's not that great. You can see that it's going to cost about $84 USD. But then you can do things which you do like a partial upfront or a full upfront, and then you reserve your instances. So basically, you're dedicating for a year that you're going to use that resource. It's got some information about how they do all the calculations. But if we do a no up front, you can already see that it's dropped down to, it's dropped $30 US. If I do full up front, pay for the whole lot for 12 months, and it's going to work out a bit cheaper as well. Say if you do 3 years. So that's a big one. If you're building a server for hosting specifically and you're going to have it longer than 12 months, make sure that you reserve your instances. And then this is just your storage. So, you might have 100 gig storage on the server, or you can set whatever. You set your storage type. General purpose SSD is fine. I'm going to set that back to on demand. So here we can see that our instance here is going to be the $81, and then our storage is $12, and that's what this server is going to cost per month to run. So this is probably the most accurate tool you're going to get. Because everything's done at an hourly rate, if you want something monthly, you're multiplying everything by 750, and then when you get into the realm of load balancing, you need to somehow account for instances that might only spin up for 5 minutes in a whole month. It gets a bit complicated, but you just set your rules and whatnot. So at Butterfly, I think we would charge it at the additional is, so say we might have a plan where they run 2 instances all the time, and then can spin up to a maximum of 4 instances. I think we charge, I think we do something where we charge 2 of those instances at a full month, and then add 7 days worth of running it with the 4 instances. So, but yeah. I'm currently working on a Butterfly, a migration to move our current servers with our current provider over to AWS. I think there's about 40 odd servers, which will be your classic style vertical hosting. And they're mostly, I think, all going to be C5 large instances. There might be one which might be extra large, but the other thing to consider is if you're looking at putting something like WHM and cPanel on the server, to use the Amazon Marketplace, that will help you spin up a server. Downside is it doesn't include, so you can select your servers here, your instance, and actually spin one up. That doesn't include the license. The license you have to get from cPanel themselves. And there's a handy little link there on how to build a cPanel hosting environment on AWS. So what is Butterfly doing? So we've recently launched 3 projects into AWS. One is the Treasury Corporation of Victoria, and the other one is the Public Transport Ombudsman of Victoria. Both of those are Joomla websites which run in AWS. They're load balanced, so they run the bare minimum they need off peak, and then when there's more traffic, it'll automatically spin more servers up and come back down again. And we've also launched MediChat, which is a custom platform. So that's deployed in a similar way to the other two sites, just using different software on the. I'll get into that in a second. But it's essentially a online vet. So veterinary clinics will be part of this, and then each veterinary clinic has their own vets in there, and those vets can then have their clients do a video call with their pet for a diagnosis. That's built using quite a few different things. It's all built in Python using Django. Has a React front end to go with it, as well as a whole API backend and all that stuff. So you can kind of see when we're looking at load balancing, this is a very basic kind of where things are at. When you start looking at horizontally scaled things and load balancing, you increase things like your redundancy and all that. So you have multiple servers in availability zones. So when one availability zone goes down, you've got redundancy in other ones. You can also do cross-region. So here we can see we've got the web servers in their own availability zone. We've got RDS, that's our database servers sitting at the back. And yeah, there is a more complex version of this, which is on the next slide, but where it's got security best practices. But yeah, then we use Amazon EFS as like a file mount to mount onto these servers. So when people are uploading, say, images, the images directory on this server is actually mounted to this electronic file system. And that's the more complex version. So that's pretty much it. Hang on a sec. So Jeff, you've asked shared hosting for 50 sites, each using its own partitioned area with WHM and cPanel. So Jeff has asked for sample shared hosting for 50 sites, each using its own partitioned area with WHM and cPanel. How much in EC2? It really depends, Jeff, on how you want to set that up, and what instance you go with. You might find that it might, in some cases, it can be better to spread those 50 clients over over a number of smaller servers. Does that make sense?
That's what I do at the moment with the hosting I have.
Yeah.
They're each partitioned into their own individual areas. So no one can be, you know what I mean? Like normal shared hosting where you can get infected with your own environment and it can infect other websites. When they're partitioned, these are completely partitioned off from each other.
But so it's one solid server.
It's still one server, but yes, it's just the way it's been set up.
Yeah, so depending on the size of that server, you might actually find that, instead of having one server, you spread that over 5 servers and have 10 sites on each one.
Yep.
Because there's less load on those servers, you can actually make them smaller. And then you might get some benefits out of it that way.
Right.
It just depends on, I would look at what your current server is and see what it, what it's going to cost in EC2 using that calculator, and then have a bit of play where you're setting up a number of smaller servers to kind of share the load. Because the price jumps when you start going into, say, the C5, like 2XL and stuff like that, prices get quite expensive. So
I pay about $400 a month for the current environment. So I'm just wondering whether it can be done cheaper. That's all. Always like to save a dollar.
It could possibly be done cheaper. There is a bit of a technical risk though, because you're basically full access of the server. There's no one managing it for you. So yeah.
Who's doing support?
The power's nice, but yeah, it's. I think you could get into AWS cheaper than $400 a month.
But like you said, you do lose that support, I guess, and that's something that is a cost and of value.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're currently getting it through a provider, the chances are you've got some kind of support agreement that is on the back of that. And
yeah, we're using Synergy, which is the wholesale arm of what is it? Venture IP, which is the retail arm.
Yep.
So it's basically just their wholesale arm going from the same people that Venture go through.
They're all right mob. So
support's very good in this country. Makes a difference. Something I've got to look at. If I've had to manage the whole thing myself, there's a lot of time that would be used where I could be doing other things, I guess. So
I'm with you, Jeff. Server management is worth every cent.
Yes.
We've got another question here. So do you then run the servers you're moving as individually hosting servers or as a dedicated server that you can break into SIG?
Yeah, that was me, James. So I think you might have answered that on the following slide, in that you are spinning up 50 Ubuntu boxes.
Yep.
So it's not really one dedicated server, but you also don't have 50. Have you got an individual EC2 instance for each client, or have you got it all in a big?
So Butterfly currently we have about 40, I can't remember the exact number, but it is about 40 to 50 VMs that we're migrating to AWS. Each one of those VMs will be their own instance. I'm still working on how I'm going to break it up. If I was to go for a like for like, I think I'm looking at the C5 large, or it might be the extra large for each server. But there's some of those servers where there's probably 2 or 3 servers where there's like 2 clients on one and 3 clients on the other, so they can probably be merged and stuff like that. I'll be doing the migration like as I go. So there'll be, we'll be picking servers to do specific weeks and then migrate, like doing the migration of the sites on there, then killing it afterwards. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Data costs. The data costs of AWS can get a bit tricky. In some areas, they can go from being as minimal that you won't notice the actual charge to being quite huge, but you've got to be, for the data itself to be massive in terms of the cost, you've got to have like huge traffic. Yeah, you'd have to go pretty intense on what you're actually doing. If you're just using the basic setup where you have a VPC, your standard subnets and all that, the traffic within AWS to all the resources is actually free. It's when you're doing traffic outside of your VPC or in that isn't user data, that it can get costly. So as long as you stay in that realm of one VPC with your subnets inside, and then your instances and everything, and all your database services are in the one area and they're all talking together, that's fine. But yeah. Carlo has asked me if I've got any sample images of Puppet. I've never used Puppet. Do I? Let me see, because I'm so.
Right. Okay.
Puppet is a automation / orchestration tool that you can use to manage servers. I'm using it myself.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Cheers. Bye.
I'm using it myself to manage the servers that we're moving to AWS. Basically, instead of starting a server, going in there, setting up a web server and users and your directories and all that stuff every single time manually, what this does is allows you to dictate what gets installed, how things get set up and all that on your whole fleet. So I don't have any example photos of what it looks like, but yeah, sorry, Carlo, I don't have anything really I can show you. If you want to look at there's a website called linuxacademy.com. It's a paid service, but they've got some really good how-to courses on all the AWS stuff as well as the Puppet stuff, Carlo. I've gone through their quick starter for Puppet and their Puppet certified, and it's helped me quite a lot to understand Puppet. So if that's something that you want to look at, Linux Academy is a good place for resources. So, so if I'm running a Joomla site across multiple instances, how do you keep databases in sync? So Tim, when you have a Joomla site running across multiple instances, what we usually do is we actually set the database up on a separate service. So there's a service called RDS, which is a relational database. So think of it like a completely separate server that has the database, and then your 3 or 4 Joomla servers that are all running the same website will just connect to that RDS as normal. There is a new product, well, it's not new now, it's been out for a while, called Aurora. And Aurora is AWS's version of a MySQL database that is designed for scaling and redundancy. So when you create a Aurora database cluster, it'll create 2 database servers for you, basically a main one, which is like a writer. So that'll do read and write and everything. And then there's a second one, which is just a reader. So that'll process just reading information. If anything happens to the writer, the reader gets promoted up and you have that redundancy built in. So, so yeah, they're essentially talking to a single database server on its own and whatnot. Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah, that completely covers it. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'd just like to drop in a bit of stuff here. The big advantage of going to AWS, and it's pretty hard to justify it on costs, is the range of databases that are available. So if you don't need to go to a relational database, if you can use one of the other databases, they've got some pretty neat stuff there. So they've got a thing called Redshift, and they've got a Cassandra database, which they call Amazon Keyspace, and there's another one called DynamoDB. They're all for different applications, but your things like Cassandra, its read and write time's 2 milliseconds compared to probably 200 milliseconds for a relational database.
Yep.
So, and they do that by basically spreading that database over a large number of servers, probably 20 or 30. but that's all behind the scenes, and all you do is pay for the access. So if you're looking for high performance databases, these guys are definitely worth looking at. So if you're going to go to AWS, just have a look at the problem, your data problem. If you don't need relational databases, if you just need a key value pair, some of these other databases are definitely worth looking at, and they're a lot cheaper than the relational databases. So that's my 2 bobs worth.
I have one here from Eon. The thing that scares you about AWS servers is that you don't know about the server security. Would you say it's a major issue? I don't think it is a major issue. There are different areas to what AWS has responsibility over to what you do. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's all documented somewhere. AWS basically takes care of the hardware, the mechanical side of it. Anything at an operating system level, kind of and up. So all of your firewall configuration, security groups and all that, that's all on you. But the good thing is because AWS wants to make sure that you're as secure as possible, they do provide a number of security audit tools. They've just released one that it will do a scan every, you can schedule it, so you can do it every week, every month on all of your EC2 instances, and it will do like a vulnerability scan, what packages need updating and all that stuff. So there's, in terms of security, it's pretty secure, as long as, you know, you kind of follow their best security practices, which are all documented very well and all that stuff. Does that kind of help, Eon?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. I think I'd probably just stick where I am.
And you can
start a debate about my name as well.
you can help him out with the pronunciation, Alan.
You can call me Owen or Eon. I'll answer to pretty much anything, to be fair. You don't stick with this name and not get used to it.
James, just a quick one. I've put it in there, but the runcloud.io, I missed their presentation, so I only spoke to the guys during lunch. But from what I understood, they had a full graphical, what do you call it? Full graphical interface that you just drop down on a blank server.
Yeah.
From what I understood, I don't know a lot about it because, like I said, I missed their great presentation. I had to toy up between that and another talk at the same time. Was
that from their online one that they just had?
No, that was from the 2019 one. It'll be online, but anyway, because all their talks went online. So I should chase it up and have a better look at it.
Yeah. I mean,
those guys flew down from Malaysia. They were an Indian company, but I think, who were working with programmers from Malaysia. And I spoke to them during the lunchtime, and from what my small comprehension and what they were explaining was basically if you have a blank server and you don't know much about server admin or the low-level server admin, you can just drop this thing on here and then you get your cPanels and everything else you look after, and it does the rest for you.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that would cross over into EC2, for instance, but that easily.
It could do.
Without questions. I thought you may have heard of it. There's probably a mile of stuff out there like that.
There's a few things. I was trying to think of. I mean, in saying that, the AWS console itself is getting pretty user friendly these days. Can still be a bit tricky to navigate, but the documentation's good. So, yeah.
I mean, it's like anything else. But yes, free, for instance, is easier to use, I guess. But when you drop Cloudberry on it, the Cloudberry Explorer for S3, then everything else is just, it's just child's play then.
Yeah. Yep.
especially for the more cryptic, permissions and things like that.
Yep. Yeah, the S3 can be a tricky one for permissions. Yeah.
That's it from me.
I found it. There we go. Round clip.
They were pretty excited. That was the end of last year, as if it was something new and great. So they may have just been excited guys, but that's the way it come across, as if they were offering something that was new to the marketplace.
No, there's a few of them out there that do a similar thing. So I'm just trying to think of a couple. What was the one that I was using? Can't remember off the top of my head now, but there are a couple kind of things that give you that really nice user interface to build as you go quite easily.
James, what's the thing you were most concerned about when you're transferring from a traditional hosting to the new world?
Will I have the Googling skills to get through it? Right? But there was a few things. I think
it looks like a bit more than copy and paste programming, James.
Yeah, it's a change of thought when you're going into something like AWS, even Azure or Google, is having that different mindset of, you know, knowing your requirements and knowing, like, you know, in the early days when we were first getting into it, there are a few times like thinking about a site being stateless is one of the big kind of switches you have to make, because if you deploy something and you don't make the images directory stateless and then the site redeploys on a brand new server, you've just lost all your images. So just having that change of mind, you know, having that in your mind, and then being cloud, thinking small and going, you know, think small and grow rather than going as big as you can afford to start off with as well. And yeah, our current provider, they're very old school, so we pay them quite a lot every month for a pool of resources that all of our servers, our VMs share. And no matter how many shut down on a spin up, you get billed that fixed amount. So that's going to be a nice thing with migrating to AWS is, you know, we know that the moment we shut down a server from the fleet, you automatically save that money straight away. It's not like oh yeah, that'll be as of next bill. It'll be from the second it's shut down onwards. And just having those slight change of mind, if that makes sense.
Anyone got any more questions for
James, there's Amazon, AWS has got a product called Website Solutions, and there's simple website hosting, which is Joomla, not likely to scale up to more than 5 servers, etc., etc., etc. Have you guys looked at that at all? Or?
I haven't used that specific one. There is a product by AWS. It's part of their suite of products. It's called Lightsail. So
yeah, that's sort of even simpler, I think. Try Lightsail for a month. I think that is it. Yeah.
You will select your WordPress thing and it will deploy a simple setup. I think we used it once. You still had to do some tricky messing around with it. But yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
I have a question, if I can.
Yep.
So okay, so what I'm wondering is, okay, so I'm used to hosting with sort of generally normal hosting companies. I've got, like you say, VMs on the hosting company thing. So I have someone who's sort of effectively supporting me who knows more about servers, right?
Yep.
Going to something like Amazon, like say setting up an EC2, I don't have the background to be able to do that. I would be interested in doing that and setting, like I have specific clients that want me to move their developments to EC2s on Amazon because they're in a sort of a Microsoft Azure type thing. They use Amazon all the time, but they don't have the understanding of sort of like a LAMP stack type understanding of the servers that we're going to need to do that. And so ultimately what I sort of need is I need someone who can be my server buddy or I pay to know more about Amazon EC2s and how they're set up and those kind of things, that I pay them to make sure that how things are set up correctly.
Yep.
To do that job, or they provide me with servers that are set up properly to serve things like Joomlas and things like that. Do those people exist?
I couldn't name it off the top of my head. You could. It is something like, say, for example, if you approach Butterfly.
Yeah.
It's a bit of work that we, sit down and discuss with you.
Okay.
In terms of, looking at what your current infrastructure is, what it will look like in AWS with costings and stuff like that, and then obviously.
Okay, so maybe we'll have a chat about that at another time. Because I suppose the clients that want me to do this type of thing are the biggest clients I have. Yeah. And so sort of learning how to do it on their dime sort of sounds career risky, if that makes sense. So having somebody who can provide good, well set up servers in that kind of way and do it, that's definitely worth something.
There's a position opening there for somebody unemployed at the moment who knows AWS. I'm sure there's lots of us that love to pay. Probably enough people around to create full-time work for them without a worry.
Well, it seems to be a hole in the market from the point of view that everyone I know the people that know about AWS seem to be from an enterprise background, and they know Azure and IIS and all those kind of things, but they have no idea at all about PHP, MySQL, sort of open source stuff. And when you start talking about it, their eyes glaze over. So sort of there's sort of a missing link there.
Yes, someone just needs to fill that missing link and advertise it.
There are a couple of other bigger ones, so like Anchor Hosting and Bulletproof also do the AWS site management, as Pete mentioned in the chat.
All right. So, okay, that's all I wanted to ask. Okay, thank you.
It's good.
All right. Any other questions? We're on time, which is nice to be. So, any other questions for James?
Probably lots, but I'd be putting him more on the spot at the moment, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
When's his next haircut planned for?
I just had one like a month ago. Gosh.
Oh, mate.
It's that beard.
No, you're looking fabulous. Don't worry.